Okay, this is the first project management session which I'm recording, and there is going to be an introduction both to me and to the subject really. Okay, so there's a bit of a word cloud about what I'm all about. That's a picture of me, my room, my office, my office hours, a book which I've written with a colleague. Okay, learning objectives. So what am I hoping you guys are going to get out of this module? So in the first instance, I want to make sure that you have an appreciation and understanding of the concepts and techniques employed in delivering and managing projects. So by concepts I mean theories and ideas and key issues, and by techniques, well, there's a lot of techniques which are associated with project management, so it's getting to grips with some of those and making sense of them, and being able to understand them and apply them. Secondly, understand the role of projects in delivering organisations' strategic needs. Projects exist not for their own purpose, not for their own ends, but as a means of organisations doing business as usual, changing the way they do that business. So it may be building a new factory, installing a new IT system, carrying out some sort of complex organisational change, whatever it is. The organisation needs projects in order to carry out that change. To encourage a critical perspective on projects. Now, projects are highly problematic. There's a debate around what we mean by success and failure. There's a debate around what the best way is of delivering projects, and this debate continues. And projects, as you'll see in a moment, fail and fail badly. So it's trying to understand projects from a more critical perspective, and throughout the module I'll try to encourage you to think about projects in a more critical way. So by the end of the course you should be able to use the concepts and theories, frameworks and techniques and processes which were presented in the module and which you'll have a chance to have a go at, to develop strategies for and to design, plan and control projects. Okay, these are some of the key topic areas we're going to cover. I think pretty much all those will be covered to a greater or lesser extent throughout the module. This is the textbook. Any earlier edition will be fine, frankly. So until a couple of years ago I was using the second edition, that was fine. That would be fine for this module now. So feel free to get hold of a copy from a second-hand copy from Amazon or wherever you want to get your books from, or you can get a new copy if you like. The new edition won't have that nice picture of the yacht on it, unfortunately. We have a rather dull picture of some people in front of a flip chart on the international version. But it's a good book, covers the material from an American perspective, but has all sorts of case studies in it from all over the world, and is a good introduction to project management. If I'm honest, there's a whole load of project management books, some of which are referenced throughout the module, and they're all fine, frankly. So there we are. This is the structure for the module, so you can see the areas we're going to cover. Note in week 6 there'll be a research week where I'll ask you to do some work on thinking about some projects and giving some feedback on real projects, which I'll ask you to study. Okay. So the seminars, there'll be 4 seminars, classes, tutorials, whatever you want to call them, throughout the term, happening in alternate weeks starting in week 3 or 4. So you need to sign up on Canvas. I've got Dr. Kurt Liu there as the person who'll be delivering these with me. I'm actually suspect I'm doing the whole thing myself this term, so you may just have me right through. Okay, there's a research week, which I mentioned earlier, and that's the task. So you need to look at a couple of projects, ideally a successful and unsuccessful one, think about the project itself, and try to think about some reasons why you think it might have been successful or unsuccessful. A few hundred words, a couple of pages, and submit those, and then I'll give you some feedback on them. Okay. The assessment for the module is an exam, 100% exam, 2-hour exam, and hopefully you will be able to use some of the examples you covered in the research week, and which we've also talked about throughout the module, and bring those into the exam to help illustrate your answers. Okay, so projects. Let's crack on. The importance of projects. Projects are ubiquitous. It means you'll find them everywhere, in all organisations, happening all the time. Okay, Peterson Waterman, who wrote a famous book back in the 80s, estimated at the time about 50% of productive work is undertaken in the form of projects. Lindgren and Packendorf have talked more recently about the projectification of society. Strange word, but what they mean by that is that projects are finding life and taking form in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of aspects of society, both within organisations and across society more generally. Okay. So why? Why are we seeing more and more projects used, and crucially, project management techniques, some or all of them, in order to deliver those projects? So why is this happening? One reason is the compression of the product life cycle. Think about your iPhone, think about your laptop, think about all sorts of products which are available to you as a consumer. All these products are going through very, very quick life cycles. You get an iPhone, it lasts a couple of years, it's obsolete. You're onto the new one. And all these products come about through project delivery. A project management process is used to develop new products. Okay, organisational restructuring. So some organisations are continually restructuring. Organisations go through restructuring all the time. Each restructuring of an organisation is a form of project. Okay, we'll talk about what it means by project in a moment, but they are essentially forms of projects. Some may use project management techniques, some may not, but they're all project activities. Integrating technological and managerial change within organisations in the form of new IT systems or whatever that might be. Implementing information technologies. And focusing on the customer. This customer focus drives organisations to develop project teams which are focused on specific aspects of what the customer needs. So this customer facing aspect of organisations is to some extent encouraging organisations to adopt a project management approach. This last one, a bit more controversial. Remember I talked about thinking about projects critically. One way of thinking about projects in professional organisations such as solicitors' practices, managerial consultancies, those sort of organisations. These organisations have lots of professionals working within them. Engineering is another one, who may not necessarily need to work in a project setup, but tend to be put into project setups in order to create control, to create peer control. So if you're working in a project, you're working with and for the other project members. And if that's the case, then this encourages a discipline around professional work, which is otherwise very difficult to impose. So you see a lot of organisations, accountancy is another one, a lot of organisations setting up their professional staff into project teams, even if they're not working on what essentially is a project. And other reasons. Okay, so why study project management? Well, as I've already talked about, they're ubiquitous. They're large and small, they're simple and complex, and they are absolutely everywhere. So having at least a grasp of projects and project management and what we mean by projects is handy no matter what area of work you go into. Okay, project management's been a subject taught professionally and in business schools for decades. I've been teaching a subject for 15 years at least. I've been working in projects myself since I graduated, and you find projects everywhere, and we're teaching the subject, but projects fail all the time. Despite all this knowledge, all this research, all the teaching we've done, projects are still failing all the time, often catastrophically. Okay, so 3 examples of different types of project. The first one is a new product development. So this is the Airbus A380, and it was a subject of a major problems in the development of the aircraft, not the manufacture and selling of it, but the development of the aircraft so that it could then be manufactured and sold. Right, so it was around 2 years late, about €2 billion over budget. They lost numerous orders. Freight version had to be cancelled, although I think that actually happened in the end. EADS, the holding company of Airbus, estimate they lost €4.6 billion euros in earnings in just 2010 as a result of the delays. This is an enormous amount of money for a private sector organisation. But subsequent to its actual delivery, they had a full order book and a backlog of orders. And projects within Airbus are performing better than previously, learning from the experience they had with the A380, and crucially are doing better than Boeing. And Boeing is their main competitor. So it's not all bad news, and it wasn't all bad news for Airbus. Okay, I talked a bit about the Connecting for Health, the NHS computer project. This was a massive program of trying to introduce an IT system right through the NHS. Okay, it was called Connecting for Health. It was about £10 billion over budget. 5 years late, and most of it was cancelled. There was a huge reduction in practitioner confidence in the value of having a nationally imposed IT system at all, and actually it's not happening. However, the IT infrastructure in the NHS has been radically overhauled, and what we found is that there's small pockets and small areas of development of IT systems to create a lot more efficiency within the NHS service. So there are outcomes which are not all bad as a result of this project. Okay, this is another example, a building project this time, and this is the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. It was about £390 million overspent, 3 years late, had latent defects, so actually not during debate, thankfully, a beam collapsed in the debating room, but it's received critical praise for its architectural aesthetics and sustainability, and here we are several years down the line after it's been delivered, and people have forgotten the disaster of the project and are using the space as it is intended to be used. So that's 3 projects I've talked about, 3 different types of project. In many respects they've all failed disastrously, but even with the most disastrous project you can always find some sort of aspect of it that you could call successful or useful or some sort of contribution. So why are we bothering to study project management? The result is, as I just said, as hopefully it's apparent, nothing is straightforward. One person's success is another person's failure, and all projects involve lots of different stakeholders. Okay, success, whatever that might mean, seems almost impossible to guarantee. It is, because for some stakeholders, even the most successful project, depending on how you measure it, will still be regarded as failure, even if the consensus is that the project's a massive success. Okay, so throughout the module I'll ask you to do some reading and look ahead at the next session, the next lecture session, and try to think about and do some reading around the subject before we actually sit down, or you sit down to have the lecture. So in this first session, what we're thinking about is, what do we mean by the term project? It's not maybe as straightforward as it might seem. And how do projects differ from business as usual type activities? Okay, so what is a project? Okay, there's 2 ways of thinking about this, an orthodox view and a more critical perspective, I guess. So the orthodox view, here's a quote. There's lots of different quotes in lots of different books, and they all pretty much say the same thing. This is just one I plucked out of a book by Kerzner, and he said, a project has a specific objective, so it has some sort of goal to be completed within certain specifications, so you outline what you're trying to achieve with a start and end date. That's crucial. Funding limits, maybe, and the consumption of resources, money, people and equipment. So you have inputs in terms of resources, you have a fixed defined period of time in order to deliver the project, and has some sort of goal at the end of it. And this is pretty standard. You'll find this everywhere, and it makes total sense. Now, Linehan and Kavanagh is one example of a more radical or critical perspective on projects. Essentially, what this body of research and literature talks about is that we shouldn't focus so much on the physical attributes or the physical aspects of a project, that it's a thing, but think about the fact that it's essentially delivered by a group of people all coming together from different perspectives and trying to apply that perspective on the project. So it emerges, as Linehan and Kavanagh say, through ambiguous political practices. My take on this is that projects are socially constructed environments. They are about people, they're about politics, they're about arguments, debate, ambiguity. They are socially constructed and mediated by the participants and between the participants through language and practice. So there's a vocabulary around projects, and part of that vocabulary are the rules, procedures, systems, techniques, some of which we'll cover in the module, and those form part of that discourse. And so what a lot of people in project management tend to focus on is the rules, procedures, systems, techniques and so forth, which drive project management, but tend to ignore the wider context of the project. What does all that mean? So, in a business context, a project is a project. So it may be technology based, it may be organisational change, it may be a building or construction project, it could be anything. A film, a TV series, doesn't matter what it is, they're all projects, okay, and they normally are complex. Okay, a project can be a plan, a scheme, an initiative, so all sorts of language is used to describe what we could call a project. Okay, so you need to understand the characteristics of a project, and then when someone talks about a plan or a scheme or an initiative, you can interrogate what they mean by that and understand whether it really is a project or not. Okay, to manage is to be responsible for or be in charge of a project. So project management is about being in charge of or responsible for the delivery of a project. Okay, so management in this context is planning, organising, directing, leading and controlling the activities which go into making a project happen. Okay, so we've got some characteristics of projects. They're unique one-off endeavours, okay, entailing some sort of specific goal. So they are unique. Some are more unique than others, but they're all relatively unique. We can kind of pick apart that word unique if you want to. Okay, they're predetermined. This is a key aspect of projects. They have a start and finish date. They're time limited. Okay, Archibald talked about projects having a single integrative point of responsibility. In other words, a project manager or a project management team. They apply normally some or many project management techniques, and they have a life cycle, a beginning, a middle and an end. Okay, large or complex projects require substantial resource and substantial capital commitment. Okay, so large and complex projects are particularly concerning to societies, governments, local authorities, big organisations, because of the amount of capital involved, and the complex system interactions within projects lead to increased risk. We'll talk about risk later on in the module. Okay, so some ways of thinking about project activity. It's a production function. Okay, there are inputs, some sort of activity going on, some sort of transformation process, and outputs. A lot of project management techniques derive from operations management. So if you've done the module on operations management with me, then this transformation model makes total sense in a project context. Okay, they're about temporary organisation. They are temporary organisations are put together, maybe internal organisations, maybe external organisations are put together for the temporary purpose of delivering the project, or maybe a series of projects. Okay, so again, London and Söderholm have written about temporary organisation. They're an agency for change, so they're about delivery of change within organisations or society. So projects are the means, the vehicle for delivering change within organisations and society at large. They're about resource utilisation, and a lot of the techniques I talk about later in the module are about optimising the project system. It's about making the most efficient use of resources available to the organisation, to the project team, in order to deliver the project. And they're about uncertainty management, something that looms large, more so than in projects than virtually any other kind of managerial activity, is risk and uncertainty. And so, as I said earlier, risk will form part of this module. Okay, so some of the features of projects. They're goal-oriented. Okay, they're about having some sort of outcome, some sort of result at the end. This is what we want to achieve. This is what it looks like. And that's what we're trying to achieve over the time period we have available to us. They have a set of constraints. These constraints are time-based and resource-based, and time features large in projects. The output of the project should be in some way measurable. We've delivered some sort of IT system which can lead to greater efficiency. We've delivered a new building which can be used to carry out production. We've delivered a new organisational system, hopefully again creating more efficiency within an organisation. We delivered a transport system, whatever it might be. It has to be measurable in some way. And something has to have changed through the project being carried out. If there's no change, there's no point in carrying out the project. Finally, there's uncertainty. Uncertainty, risk, these are two concepts which I pick apart a bit in the section on risk. Okay, so I've talked a bit about projects, what we mean by projects, how do they differ? What are some of the differences between projects and business as usual type management, functional or general management? Okay, so in projects, the management project team, for the project team, everything is an exception. Remember I said that projects are unique undertakings, and if it's unique, everything's new. Okay, so it's not so much the specific activities which are unique. Often the activities are carried out by specialists who carry out these activities on a repeatable basis. It's the technique specific activities in combination with other activities which is unique. Okay, for the project management team, flexibility and creativity are crucial and key because things are always changing. Despite whatever plans you have in place, things are always changing. And conflict resolution and negotiation skills are also crucial. Now these are important in business as usual activities, but they are emphasised in projects. Okay, budgeting, resourcing and control of projects is crucial and vital, and again this is important in business as usual, but looms large and becomes a major issue for projects. And finally, organisational structures are pretty special for projects. So it's about multi-departmental or multi-organisational activities. Remember I talked about temporary organisations. These are organisations coming together with lots of different disciplines, skills, specialisms and capabilities just for delivery of projects. So this becomes an important aspect of projects. Matrix management is the main way of managing projects. I'll talk about that in the next session, and it's about the acquisition of resources. Okay, so if you've done operations management, you'll recognise the 4 V's. Basically, what I mean by this is that any productive activity can be understood by these 4 V's. Volume, are we producing lots of something or very little of something? Variety, are we producing lots of different things, or are we just producing the same thing over and over again? Variation in demand. Is variation in demand high? Is it going up and down? Is it changing from year to year, month to month even? Or is variation in demand low? And finally, visibility. So to what extent is what we're doing visible to the customer? Is that a high level of visibility? In other words, we have lots of customer contact, or is it low? Now, most products made in factories will be on that end of the 4 V's. High volume, low variety, just many things made, but only one or two types of thing. Variation demand tends to be relatively low, and visibility is also relatively low. For projects, we're over there. Okay, we're not making very many of any particular thing. We have high variety. Everyone's different. We have a big variation demand, which changes, year to year, and there's a high degree of visibility to the customer. Okay. There's a video which you are welcome to watch. This video is about project management at NASA. Really good video. 10 years old or so now, but really talks about some of the key issues for NASA in delivering their big projects they have, space projects. Okay. Now, out of the book, Larson and Gray, they have this nice yin-yang model. And the reason they have this is what they're trying to pick up here is that on the one hand, projects involve lots of technical things. So I've got things like scope, work breakdown structures, schedules and Gantt charts, resource allocation, baseline budgets, and budgeting, status reports, and earned value analysis. All these things, many of these things I'll be covering in the module. So there's all these technical aspects to projects, which are a lot of them are derived from operations management. But then overlaying that are all these kind of social cultural things. Leadership, what we mean by leadership, getting the team to work together, teamwork, problem solving, negotiation, politics, varying customer and stakeholder expectations. So there's these are interlinked, as that model tries to show, but also in tension and creating problems for each other. And throughout, what the temporary organisation is trying to deliver is the project. Some of the basic things that you'll be carrying out in projects are definition of scope, management of scope. I'll talk about that later in the module. Activity scheduling, which is time management, cost and resource management, people management, managing people from different disciplines, risk and value management, also other things, strategy, business needs, how's the project fitting with the need of the business, finance, where do we acquire the finance for the project, new technologies which might be employed in delivery of the project or might be the outcome of the project, contracts. So projects are often all about contracts. They are mediated through the communications through contracts between specialist suppliers and specialist capabilities and the project team. So contracts are important. The wider community or environment, if that's impacted upon, processes, timing, all sorts of other things. Okay. So I think in the session I talked a bit about this. This is going to be something which you'll start to know as the iron triangle. Now I talked about all projects being measurable, and really the classic way in which they're measured is by 3 different aspects. We have what's at the top there, what's often called quality, sometimes specification, sometimes scope, sometimes something else. A number of ways of seeing it, but it's what we're trying to deliver in the project. What we also have are time. Remember, projects are time delimited, and cost, resource. Okay, and these are all in tension and all impacting one upon the other, and are shown in this triangle, often called the iron triangle. They're mediated through people and organisations. Okay. What this doesn't pick up, or might not pick up in a very obvious sense, is strategy, environment, sustainability, the whole life value of the project. How is the project going to keep delivering value over the life of the finished project? Stakeholders. How do different stakeholders view what we're trying to deliver in the project? Safety, maybe. Equity. Are we being fair, particularly for public sector projects? Are we being fair? Are the results of the project being evenly distributed? Anything else we can think of? Lots of other things you might think of. Right, so projects I'm going to start with as a set of strategic decisions. So what I'm going to think about now is projects and strategy. Okay, so there's all ways we can think about this. We can think of projects and strategy as a vision. So projects are delivering something which the organisation is trying to achieve. So you start with a vision. Where's the organisation going? These are some sort of mission, a statement which captures the vision, possibly the accompanying objectives. So the mission is, this is where the organisation is going, here's some articulation of that vision. Okay, this leads to an organisational strategy. How are we going to get to where we want to be? And the project strategy is about the specific objectives of the project and how these fit into what the organisation is trying to achieve. Okay. There are a number of ways of thinking about strategy in projects. So the first way of thinking about them is that strategy can be as projects. Okay, so what we're talking about here, organisations that are carrying out their business, and their business is all about a whole series of projects. These are contractors, management consultants, those sort of organisations, and what they do, their business is a series of projects. The second point there, organising people around project teams. The organisation may not even have projects, but as I said earlier, they organise particularly professionals into project teams in order to deliver small amounts of change, or maybe just to discipline and control those professionals. And the third point there is strategies delivered by projects. It's much more common. This is the common way of thinking about projects, that an organisation has some sort of strategy, strategic intent, and it's delivered through a series of different projects. The key question for all projects and all strategy is what constitutes success. And the problem there is success for whom? Is it the organisation, the parent organisation? Is it the project team? Is it the wider stakeholder community? Is it employees who might be impacted by the project? And then the other key point there is, how do we measure success? Okay, and that can sometimes be very difficult. Here's a structure, a simple structure. This is out of Harvey Mailer's book on project management. Harvey Mailer was an ex-colleague of mine. I used to work with him. He's now down at Cranfield University, I think. So he produced this simple model. Start with a vision, which is at CEO level. Senior management within the organisation have an organisational strategy. Then we have program management. I'll talk about programs a bit in a moment. We have program management, which is a series of programs within which you might have a series of projects, and the project managers are responsible for a project strategy. Project teams are responsible for the activities that deliver the project strategy, that deliver the programs, that deliver the organisational strategy, that deliver the vision for the organisation. Okay, so I said I'd talk about programs. Here's a way of thinking about them. So we start with strategic objectives and targets of the organisation, which will be strategic benefits, which could be a new IT system to create a whole load of additional efficiency, or a new factory to develop to build and manufacture a new product, or a reorganisational change which will create a whole load of efficiency within the organisation, some sort of strategic benefit. Now, at a program level, what you might have is a series of programs, and these programs will contain projects. So you'd have project A, B for program 1, project C, D for program 2, project E might be a standalone project. Now a program is a series of different projects which are interconnected. A good example would be the Olympics. So in the London Olympics, the Rio Olympics, whatever they are, Olympics contain a whole load of projects, which might be the stadia and the Olympic Village, and for accommodating the athletes, and the infrastructure, and these are all different projects which all interrelated and delivered through the overall program, which is the Olympics. Okay, so then we have the specific projects delivering on programs, and then we have sub-projects, maybe A, B. So project A might have a sub-project A1 and A2, which are interconnected but can be separated out. All these are happening as business as usual is occurring within the organisation. So portfolio management is understanding the whole collection of different projects which are being delivered within the organisation, okay, and are interrelated and helping to improve the business as usual activities. So, in terms of how strategies and projects interrelate, what are we trying to do in a strategy? We're trying to prevent implementation gaps. We're trying to prevent organisational politics having undue influence on the organisation and putting it in directions we wouldn't necessarily want to go. We're trying to prevent resource conflicts and multitasking and overlaps and inefficiencies of those sorts. And projects can help to drive out all these things. Project selection systems include a mechanism to classify projects, which projects are important, which are less important. A method for calling for project proposals. Any good ideas for new projects? What does the operations department want? What does the marketing department want? What does the accounting department want? And selection criteria in the screening process. So we have a whole load of proposals. How do we select the ones which we can afford, which are going to go ahead, and how do we screen out the ones which are impossible, or difficult, or not really a priority for the organisation? Okay, so some ways of selecting projects. We can think about it in terms of financial criteria, so net present value, payback, those sort of things. And that's very, very commonly used within organisations. What's going to be a return on this project? If we carry out this project, if we build this new factory, what's going to be a return when we start to manufacture something? That sort of thing. Okay, there's also broader strategic reasons. Are we trying to grow market share within the organisation, and can this project help deliver that? Are we trying to make it difficult, alternatively, for competitors to enter the market? So can we create a new product or new innovation within our product portfolio which will make it difficult for competitors to emulate, and if they can't emulate it, they can't enter the market? Are we trying to develop an enabler product which by its introduction will increase sales in more profitable products? So are we trying to develop some sort of new innovation which is a groundbreaking new product? Are we trying to develop new core technology that'll be used in next generation products? Are we trying to reduce dependency on unreliable suppliers by developing our own internal supplying approaches? Are we trying to prevent government intervention and regulation by shifting things forward, changing things? All these might be good reasons for delivering a project. Okay, and what you end up with is a screening matrix, and this will be the subject of the first topic in our classes. So I'll be asking you to think about different projects in the class, and we'll be using something like this to select one project against another. Okay, so that's just an example. You don't need to worry about that now. Okay, so some takeaway points from this session. Projects are important, maybe ubiquitous aspects of everyday organisational life. The main means for organisations to implement strategic change is through projects, and yet, projects seem to fail, depending on how we define fail, all the time. The key questions for you to think about are: what constitutes success and failure? We'll talk about that in more detail later on in the module. And how can organisations go about selecting the right project for them? Okay, next week, Chapter 3 plus references. How are people working in projects organised? How might culture affect the way project teams work together? And some references which I've picked up in the session today.